Good evening. Today in the news, the Russian president's visit to France comes to an end. The situation in Moscow on the eve of planned demonstrations. The Russian Entrepreneurs Congress meets in St. Petersburg. The Russian Supreme Soviet adopts a law on the procedure for considering presidential requests. Under what laws will pensions be paid in the countries of the CIS? Today, the Security Council discusses the situation in Yugoslavia. Demonstrations in Japan call for the return of the Northern Territories. Pakistan acknowledges that it is capable of producing nuclear weapons. So today we will hear the results of President Yeltsin's visit to France. The working day of the Russian president began today in Élysée Palace, where Boris Yeltsin met with French President François Mitterrand. The French press joked that Yeltsin came to seduce Paris and succeeded. Yeltsin returns to Moscow with credits which will help our country overcome the economic crisis and save the reform and democratic processes. France will provide 3.5 billion francs, which will be used to purchase grain, meat, and food products. Another part of the aid will be used to buy technology, equipment for chemical and metal production, and financing the reorganization of industry and finance systems in Russia. Paris will assist Russia in entering the International Monetary Fund as soon as possible and urge the West to take measures to stabilize the ruble. Today, Russia and France signed a treaty of cooperation. The first trade agreement between these countries was signed in 1891. The return of Russia into the world community is evaluated here as a factor which will have a big impact on the European landscape. A Russia free of ideological dogmas and oppressions will take a place of dignity in a unified and integrated Europe. So the visit is at an end. Paris believes that the visit was successful, both in the political and economic senses and in purely human terms. Yeltsin returns home with hope that Paris will keep its promises. So it is all now in our hands. Boris Yeltsin has already returned to Moscow. We have just received this footage. We should say that before flying home, Boris Yeltsin and François Mitterrand held a final press conference. Both sides are satisfied with the visit. Russia will receive loans and credits which will be guaranteed as loans from Western businessmen are by reserves of gold, diamonds, and natural gas. Observers note that Yeltsin has never expressed such alarm at the situation in the CIS. Tomorrow in Moscow, the Congress of Civil and Patriotic Forces of Russia opens. The political opponents of the current government have appeared long ago in the democratic movement, but after the Gaidar government managed to alienate both the consumers and entrepreneurs by simultaneously raising prices and taxes, the opposition has decided it is time to organize. The organizers of tomorrow's Congress are the leaders of the Constitutional Democratic Party and the Russian Peasants' Democratic Union. Apart from the popular slogans, they have enhanced their position now thanks to the deep pockets of entrepreneurs. The existence of a business lobby is well known. They want not only to play in politics, but to have a serious impact on it. Today, it is assumed that the future union will be led by Russian Vice President Rudskoy. The Constitutional Democrats consider themselves the successors of a party which was active in Russia in 1905 with the same name. The cadets favor the priority of the individual over national and class interests and see the optimal way of achieving this in a democratic and federative state. Tomorrow, regional leaders will take part in the conference. It's well known that at the same time as this Congress of Civil and Patriotic Forces, there will be an action organized by the Moscow labor movement, the communists. Is this a coincidence or a planned scenario? Several political forces want to go out on the streets. Others prefer to find constructive dialogue and possibilities for constructively opposing the government with a new program. Therefore, we do not welcome the types of activity, which will be conducted by the Communists and the Democratic Russia. As we know, the Popular Party of Free Russia refused to participate in this Congress. What is the position of its leader, Alexander Rudskoy? Do you expect him to appear here? We expect Rudskoy to speak here as the Russian Vice President, as we also expect and have invited Russian President Boris Yeltsin and other official leaders at the high level. For 2 weeks, the Russian media have been discussing what we will receive from these mass demonstrations on February 8th and 9th, conducted by the democratic forces and also by the neo-Bolsheviks and rightist forces. There's no unanimity on them. All we know is that Moscow will be the scene of, on Saturday and Sunday, of opponents and supporters of the government. But we believe that most Muscovites will simply rest over the weekend. Everyone is interested in calmly conducting these events. What's happening in their headquarters of these parties? We asked our correspondent to find out. The Russia Labor Movement Committee, which is organizing the February 9th rally on Manege Square, was full of activity today. People kept arriving with packets of new newspapers, Lightning, Our Russia, and Popular Truth. Volunteer distributors were taking them out. A group from Ryazan came to support the group. They believe in their ideals sincerely and intend to fight for them. Their opponents from the movement Democratic Russia are also preparing for their meeting by the White House, no less seriously, but the situation there seemed more calm. Despite the crisis within their leadership, the activists are counting on the support of the masses on February 9th. The simultaneous appearance of polar opposite political forces is fearsome to some people. Here's what Valentin Polyetkov, the president of the Moscow organization of the Russian Democratic Party, said. The results of these events this weekend could be the last meetings we see, the last opportunity for Muscovites to express their opinions on the streets. This is a provocational act intended to heighten the tensions. Talks, predictions about the fact that the failure of reform would return us to red dictatorship has become conventional wisdom. In the West, they understand the situation, but they cannot do everything. Loans and credits on government lines have their limits, and private business is scared away by the internal instability here. Even during the time of Gorbachev Glasnost, it was hard to predict that there were so many first-class market economics specialists in our countries. When the government is criticized by economists, this is understandable. But when politicians of various colors get into the game, it raises doubts about their sincerity and their motives. But we can expect a lot of people out on the streets, despite the fact that political activism has declined. We might consider these February demonstrations and counter-demonstrations a rehearsal for more serious activities in the future. If fuel is added to this fire, barricades and walls could be erected again. Life has become much more difficult, but the reforms are more difficult because the society is divided, and many are appealing for a return to the past. This all conduces to political maneuvering. The left, the moderates, the right, national patriots are all talking about Great Russia, forgetting what position the government should take to avoid miscalculations. This does not add to the health of the society. We are living as in a jungle, but even in the jungle, people forget their animosities in times of crisis, and when a drought comes, they peacefully drink from a single spring. Our children know this from Kipling's Jungle Book. Nevertheless, today, the representatives of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia were invited to a joint session of the parliament in order to explain how they are preparing to keep order during the February 8th and 9th meetings. This was necessitated by the confusing answer given by executive agencies along the lines of, in case of necessity, untraditional measures could be taken against the participants in the meeting. The explanation came in the following form. The Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs, General Kulikov, said that during the meetings, social order will be maintained in Moscow in accordance with the laws. Today at the Supreme Soviet, there were other important issues. The parliamentarians approved a draft law on the procedure for considering requests to the parliament by the Russian president. This law is intended to ease relations between the president and parliament. The problem of coordinating the work of executive and legislative power is far from solved. The Legislation Committee has prepared a package of legislation controlling the government of Russia's nomination of ministers, including taking ministers from within the parliamentary corps. They are motivated by the danger of a drain of talent from the parliament into the government structures. Now, the relative equilibrium in the society is based on two institutions: the institution of the president